Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to, I think, our 15th or maybe 16th webinar. This morning, our topic is the evolution of social business in China. And we're delighted to have Rosa, who's sitting somewhere in Shanghai, I think somewhere near Zhongshan Park this morning. So before we begin, just to go through a few bits and pieces, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with who we are now, but the China-Britain Business Council is the leading organization helping UK companies grow and develop their business with China. CBBC supports British companies of all sizes and at every stage of market entry with practical in-market assistance, services, industry initiatives, as well as a membership program offering access, seminars and significant networking. CBBC works closely with UKTI and the FCO and has a strategic partnership with the British Chamber of Commerce in Beijing, providing corporate members with reciprocal membership. Our business-led board and professional team have extensive first-hand experience of doing business in China, and through nearly 60 years of engagement, CBBC has built up exceptional connections with government and business across China. CBBC services are delivered through a network of 11 offices in the UK and 13 strategic locations across China. CBBC helps companies to network and learn from China-savvy multinationals and SMEs to understand the intricacies of doing business in China and to develop sound strategies for expanding in the fast-changing and dynamic marketplace that is modern China. So that's just a little bit of background of ourselves. You can see our reach throughout the UK and also throughout China. I would draw your attention to our new offices over the last couple of months in Xi'an and also in Changsha. So as with the opening markets and different areas in China that we can you can explore as a business person, we are also putting offices there to support you in all of your endeavors. All right, moving swiftly along. So feel free to ask questions. Feel free to get involved. You can either ask a question as we go along, and I'll stop the speaker's flow and I'll drop it in. Otherwise, we'll save it for the end. If I could, please, if I could ask you first to click on the area that I'm highlighting now, which is raise your hand. So if you could click on the little button that says raise your hand, please. That'll just make sure from my perspective that you're all hearing me loud and clear. So I can see lots of hands going up. Let me just check. Yeah, great. That's no problem. Okay, so that means that basically tells me that you can hear me. So if you have a question, we won't have vocal for everybody. I think that just the background noise makes it a little confusing. So if you could just drop any question that you have, that could be a question about the topic that we're covering, or maybe you're having a technical difficulty, just drop it into that little bracket there that I'm now currently highlighting. All right, that's it from me. Let's talk a little bit about our speaker. So Rosa is the Consulting Manager for Social Business Consulting at CIC Insight. So joined CIC in January 11, initially to lead business development, before becoming an inaugural member of CIC's Social Business Consulting team. An agency background in marketing and PR engagement, working with a diverse portfolio of global brands gives Lewis a keen understanding of the way brands and agencies can leverage social media intelligence for better business performance. In particular, distilling consumer insight to inspire creative and informed strategy. As consulting manager, Lewis can engage CIC's specialist research and consulting team across a range of diverse industries to gain a clear overview and keen cross-category understanding that elevates internal performance and external client offerings. He graduated from the University of Edinburgh in 2005 with an MA Honours degree in literature. He then worked extensively as a copywriter, a skill maintained through his position as chief editor of CIC's English language materials, from white papers to monthly internet trend watches. So we're delighted to have Lewis here to give us, I suppose, an understanding of a really important part of doing business in China. I think we talk a lot to companies, and one of our sort of stock things that we say is that you have to have a digital media presence. At our conference in March, the keynote speaker was the president of Jaguar Land Rover China, and even he was going into how important these online platforms were for his product. So it's not just about pop stars, and it's not just about Hello Kitty. It's also about big luxury products as well as everyday FMCG products. So I think it's a really, really important topic, and we're delighted to have Lewis. I checked a little bit that Lewis was still there, but now I have that sort of scary Houston, are you out there kind of moment. Lewis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the introduction.
All right, Lewis, thank you. No problem. Well, I think at this point that's enough for me. So what I would do is simply hand over to yourself.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Shanghai, or good morning or good evening, or any time, depending on what time it is, wherever you're sitting. Really appreciate this opportunity to come and speak to you about what I think is a really interesting and really exciting and really dynamic place to be, and that's not only sitting here in Shanghai in the lovely early afternoon sunshine, but also to be involved in China's digital landscape, which is unlike any other. It's vast and it's fragmented and it's hugely dynamic, and it can be intimidating, but it's also offers loads of opportunities for people looking to do business, people looking to learn about consumers, and just the opportunities are endless. And that's kind of what I want to cover with this presentation. I think that yes, we always hear about how important it is to get involved in digital or to get involved in social, and a lot of the time that boils down to people thinking, well, therefore I have to open an account on a social platform and start talking at my consumers. And I think part of that may be true. I think more importantly, I think using the information and using the behaviors and learning from these behaviors can impact your business in far more tangible ways and far more authentic and far more deeply engaging ways than just opening up an account on some platform and starting to speak. So if we were to look at the Chinese social media landscape in the round as we have it on the prism there that you'll see in front of you, we've been kind of editing and updating this since about 2008, this prism, and every single time we bring out a new version, it gets a little bit more crowded and a little bit harder to read, and all the logos get a little bit smaller and more bunched together, and that is essentially as much an exercise in highlighting how crowded and how fast moving and how constantly updating this market is in itself. I think that we start to partition these into, what are your key, your core platforms for different business interaction. But you'll see that we have, the Western equivalents and the Chinese versions of these platforms up against each other. I would say that too often there is an element of China copying the West, and it's certainly propagated by Western digital agencies, if you like, Western brands, and that's something that hopefully by the end of this presentation we can start to put in its place too, because one of the most exciting things for me here is the creativity that is that's evident in so much of this. You don't have to be involved in the Chinese internet for long before you start to see that any ideas that China might not be as creative or engaging as any other market in the world. I think those are quickly put to bed. So in terms of the growth of this landscape and what's brought us to this current position of almost overcrowding in the digital space, I think that what we're seeing here is a stable and almost verging on the exponential growth trend in engagement with digital platforms. You'll be able to see yourself the different types of platform we're talking about, from Microblog, begets, social networking sites, video sites, instant messaging, and so on. But I think it's really important to take away from this is very fast. There's new platforms appearing all the time. There's others dying, I suppose, at a similar rate. But we're looking at a country of about 1.3 or so billion people, and almost half of them have regular access to the internet. With the explosion in smartphone technology, and that ability to have a far more affordable access portal to the internet, I think that's going to change things even faster. And if we skip on to look at the growth in terms of engagement in social media, or more specifically in these social media platforms, we can say that I suppose worth noting at 2004 that's when CIC, that's where my company came along, and that's an interesting turning point. I kind of want to start there and look either side of that. So from 2004, that's what we can really consider to be the start of Web 2.0, or a real kind of upswell in user-generated content in the Chinese internet. It's also that time where we coined the phrase I1, or internet word of mouth. And that's something that we created here at CIC to mean more than social media. Because if we look back beyond that period of IWOM starting in 2004, to that spell of kind of little interaction between 94 and kind of 2004, there is social media in China then. There is absolutely no. Social media doesn't begin and end with Facebook. There was absolutely social media. There was detailed conversations going on in BBS, bulletin board systems. Instant messaging was starting to flourish around the end of the 90s. The adoption of these types of technologies is something that predates what we consider to be social media in the West. And if we take that right up to the other end of the scale through Baidu and search and the start of Q&A sites, through microblogging and social networking sites, more of a kind of akin to Twitter and Facebook, then we get through to the end and we have mobile social, which is something I'll talk more about at the end, but I just wanted to tie that to the that access point idea. So when we move on to look at the portal with which we access the internet, I think that that's particularly interesting because that is essentially what internet means. Internet to me was Google, or was a search, a search site. That's what the internet meant to me. I sat down and the internet was actually Yahoo search, I suppose, but that's what the internet was. And I think that's really interesting here in China because the received information is traditionally something treated skeptically. I think that's true of anywhere in the world, but particularly in China, there's a sense that where you get your information from, your source of information, has not always been open. I think that there's also a thing of it. It's not always been that good. I think TV is pretty poor, that type of thing as well. But from accepted information from news portal sites, where it's these editors of the portal sites who are choosing what you get, to search where you have an idea where you can choose it, but it's actually search algorithms that are kind of deciding what you can see, and that breeds differences between Google and Baidu search results and so on, which I don't really want to get into now, through to social, where it's far more of a crowdsourced intelligence. I decide who I get my information from, and I decide who I'm going to follow, and I think that's very important as we look forward, and particularly look into social, which is that last step. We start to look at mobile social as something that we carry with us. That information is something that's freely available to us as and when we want it, and from a source that we trust and have vetted ourselves. I think that's key to the market here in China. But I kind of want to go on from that again to the kind of the more interesting bits as far as I see them, and that's the people that live here. So these are netizens. And the term netizen itself bears looking at. Wangmin, or netizen, this is a citizen of the internet, and this is a netizen created term. This is a self-conscious term that reflects this idea that we are a society online. We are not internet users. When we talk about it from a kind of corporate point of view, we do not talk about engaging internet users or counting number of users on a site. We talk about this as a community. And I think that the more that we can look at this as an open and inclusive community, the better we are at participating in it. And that's something I think that we at CIC have been saying as well, that we definitely view it as participation rather than engagement. So I think the concept of netizen is very important. And when we look at behavior of Chinese netizens, we can also start to really dispel any concerns that China is not as creative as the rest of the world, or China does not have the same wit or ability to really create content or champion other people's content, because as you can see from this Forrester research that we've had up there, the only place that China loses out to US and to Europe is in being inactive. The only place that the US and Europe where netizens are beating China is in laziness. We're more inclined to have conversations, to critique others' work, to collect and collate different bits of netizen-created content, if you like, and we're more engaged with brands, products, and services online in China than anywhere else in the world. But I think that even more interesting, now that we've got this idea that we're creating more and that we view ourselves as a society, I think looking at the cultural artifacts of this society is particularly interesting. So what we have here in the top left is the progression of net novels in China. Something very interesting, your route to publishing. I'm going to do it myself, essentially. And then ultimately, after that, there comes this step where I can sell it, and there is a market for it. So that takes us from the first net novels, which were published online and then turned into to TV shows and eventually into movies. Popular last year, particularly, was Bubu Jin Sing, which is about a girl who gets a bump on the head and wakes up in the Qing Dynasty. I don't know what it is about that story archetype, that taking someone out of time, that's particularly resonant in China, but that's particularly interesting. But the way that we create content for mass media is influenced by net language. And that AMD screenshot there, that's a clean example of this for advertising. So this is an advert or a snapshot from AMD processors. And as you see, the guy is sitting on a red sofa and he's talking to a popular blogger. And this is a TVC that was born out of a Chinese net slang called chang sha fa, or to grab the sofa. And that's to be the first one to comment on a blog post. So the message of this was, you can grab the sofa better or faster with AMD processors than with competitors. So that's creative being absolutely informed by Chinese net culture. I think we all shop in the same place. We all shop on Taobao here in China, and as that we know, we have a shared experience, we have a shared understanding of what it's like to shop on Taobao, and that's that you're called dear all the time. So you see from that piece of copy there, every line ends in dear with 3 exclamation marks, every line ends in chin. And I think that that's something you can be in on the joke. That's something brands can now be in on the joke, because we all shop at the same place. We're all part of this community. We're all netizens together, where we're a brand or a key opinion leader or an end consumer. That's very, very important. We're all in on the joke. But it's a little too in on the joke when the police force start to use it. That's what we see there. So this is instantly recognizable. This is something where we want to communicate to people in a way that kind of shortens the distance between us, which is something brands are always looking to do. So speaking in the same language and sharing an in-joke is a very important way to do that. There's other ways to do it, like the Taobao style. There's also the roaring or the shouting style, that Paoxiaqiu down the bottom right. It's something that we understand, it's something that we share, and it's something we can all be a part of. There's also big things to be said about language in terms of both inspiring creative, but shaping the way that people live their lives. So Geili, meaning powerful or awesome, essentially, giving way to Intel's Geili IT, and eventually onto ungailivable, if we're going to kind of breed languages together, or bugaili, something which is unbelievable or not awesome. These things are very interesting, and ultimately they're changing the way that the offline world works. And that's what I'm really trying to get at here, the way that the digital or social media conversations are changing offline society, and changing it to such an extent that net language in that bottom right-hand picture is being legislated against in the Gaokao and in the college entrance exams, because teachers just don't know what kids are talking about these days. And I think that the way it's having to change legislature is very interesting too. But I want to look in more detail, I think, the way that we can use netizen intelligence or social listening to inspire creative and inform strategy. Because that's a fundamental way that social media is evolving into a social business practice. So a keen example here, it's not a particularly new example, but a keen example, we start with the iconic Air Jordan logo, something instantly recognizable, and the somewhat less recognizable Luis Scola, teammate at the Houston Rockets of Yao Ming, and famous here in China. So he's sponsored by Anta. Anta wanted to create the iconic Air Jordan type of logo for Luis Scola. And in order to do that, they went to social media platforms, to BBS, which will date back to '94 in China. So some of the most involved, these are practical, pragmatic discussions, these forums. Some of the most involved are about sport. in these forums, Louis Scola's nickname is Sukala, 4 carat, as in 4 carat diamond, which inspires their creative to create these this logo, which is on shoes and on caps and on other things. So that all came from his nickname, the 4 carat diamond, Louis Scola. The other examples are too numerous to mention. The original Chinese emoticon, zhong, meaning awkward or anxious, that's hugely popular online in China and now on shoes and on bags and on adverts for art exhibitions. So that's totally pervasive. Everywhere this innate net knowledge or innate knowledge of net culture is something we can share and something we can tap into to draw consumers closer together. The way that this is happening more so in this day and age is Weibo, or the microblog. Now this was a platform, I suppose, that started off as a bit of a Twitter copy. I mean, originally it was T.Sina and the T stood for Twitter. But now it's evolved to something far more engaging, far more fun, far more application friendly than Twitter ever deemed possible. But it's also the route to viral for content in China. So if we're looking at what that means, I think that when Titanic 3D was being released in China, people were worried that in the Kate Winslet topless scene, we may see scenes like that GIF on the top corner, and people reaching out and trying to touch it. So it's where we go for our entertainment news. It's also where we go for our gossip. That picture in the middle, that created a style like the Taba style and like the shouting style that we saw on previous slides, but that was the eloping style. And that was about a CEO running away with his PA. So it's also where we go for a kind of gossip news. It's also where we go for our more hard-hitting consumer affairs news. That's the venue for brands now. It's the voice in this social society. So in response to CCTV's annual Consumer Day expose, in this case we see it's McDonald's and Carrefour and China Telecom, this is where they go to respond to this. This is where the issues come to a head. You know, it truly is the viral medium. And I think that takes us quite nicely into trusting brands through Lina. You know, this is where Lina won the French Open. It wasn't through sports news sites that Chinese consumers got their news. It was from the Nike brand Weibo account. People were programmed at that stage to go to the Nike brand Weibo account for kind of, even though it's a branded sponsor, for unbiased, open-handed, entertaining, inspirational news that helps us cheer for Lina, Zhongguo Jiao. And I think that that's very important. It also has informed the way we've done things since. So even though Nike weren't a sponsor of the Olympics, we worked with them to create a social listening center that did that. Allowed them to really capitalize because they're the source for these things. But it's not all rosy for brands in social media. We have a scene from outside the National People's Congress where the triumphant red carpet style arrival of Hermes' belt brother, who netizens noticed was wearing a big gold H, and they thought that might not be the best image for trusted officials. It's also been quite interesting that based on this, we've seen a few other key elements of China's net culture come together. So I'm going to kind of lead through this story a little bit. So to rewind slightly, I think you may or may not have heard of Guo Meimei, who was the young girl who worked for the China Red Cross, but she also liked to share pictures of herself with her luxury goods. Now, this is something which has a lot of history in China, in Chinese net culture, and it's what we call shy, which we'll come on to slightly later. But I think that impact on Hermes, based on Guo Meimei's relationship with the Red Cross and her behavior of showing her status, showing her purchasing power, then we have the Hermes belt brother, and we have the collection of luxury goods being worn by other members of the People's Congress, we start to have this picture of a disconnect between luxury brand and the behaviors or the inherent behaviors of consumers. So we can start to look at that from a point of view of impact in relation to these being key opinion leaders within a space, and how does your brand or how does your business leverage these key opinion leaders. We can also look at it with a longer history of touching again on where we receive our information. The human flesh search engine, the Rosa, which is about netizens themselves collating information and recording it and keeping that as a trusted record of what happened. So we've seen that a lot, various stages throughout China's digital evolution, but in this case it's used to collect different images of luxury goods being worn by politicians. Part of what we can do is help to look at the people who are leading this conversation. So from a brand point of view, if you want to see who's particularly good at picking up the baton of your brand message and passing it on, we can do
Lewis,
that.
just to jump in there, we might have some lag on the line here. I'm on the Shy page. Are you on Shy as well?
Yes, we just switched over to the Shy page now.
Grand. We just got a second or two of lag. Just wanted to make sure that was okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in as we go along. I have a couple of stored for now, which I'll put in at the end. But if you have any that you want to ask, please type them in. Just keep going, Lewis.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to jump in with any questions. I think when we're looking at Shy, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about that and the type of behaviours that have led to the impacting the brand with cases that we've seen with Guomei and the National People's Congress. If you're unaware of what Shy is, you've not heard of this before, it's it literally translates to shine or to put out in the sun, to sun something, but it means to show off. And I think that's something that can be dealt with differently in different markets. So I think knowing local knowledge of the Chinese market, so what we said there is limited knowledge but willing to show off what they do know. There are 3 stages of Shy: product Shy, true man show, and lifestyle Shy. Look a little bit more about those, but product Shy is essentially look at my Hermes bag. True man show is look how well my Hermes bag goes in with my whole outfit. And lifestyle Shy is look, here I am at the Hermes store in Paris, and this is my sophistication as a consumer. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of Shy, if you like. Wanted to look a little bit more, we see the true man show in all its glory there. Essentially aspiring models, not looking to make any particular money of it, but you can do now. I think there was a brand called Banco, an online clothing brand called Banco, that built a social network where you could sell directly products through based on your modeling. But this taking pictures and showing off either your wealth or your purchasing power, or as is becoming increasingly the case, your consumer sophistication in where you are and what you're doing and the products you choose to buy and the brands you choose to have faith in, that's far more interesting for brand engagement. Looking at brand engagement, we saw a behavior at exhibitions of people sharing more pictures, which makes perfect sense because you're at an event and you can take pictures and you can share it. But the particularly interesting behavior was lining up your reflection in a display case with the jewelry being displayed, so it kind of almost, if you squinted, looked like you might possibly be wearing it. Now this got really, really, really popular. And so what we were doing working with Tiffany is develop something very easy and kind of give them the idea of something very easy where they could do the living mirror. And this took an innate behavior, just something that has been part of China's net culture for a very long time, and just gave it a vehicle. And I think that's more and more what netizens are looking for in their brands. There is a behavior they expect you to know. They don't expect you to be, behind the times with these things. They expect you to be facilitating natural behaviors. And as we move forward into what it is to be a social business, or what it is to transition social media from something that sits in the corner of the marketing department or is run by a PR intern to something that sits front and center and touches on various different stakeholders within an organization, I think that that's really going to revolutionize the way people do business everywhere in the world, and certainly here in China, where the digital space is so important. So the different aspects, I think, from an accessible point of view, or the point of view of accessibility, social PR, listening to what people are saying about your brand in social media, very important. Social marketing, we've seen various examples of that, setting up your branding, creative ideation, that type of thing. Social CRM, hugely important. Group purchase, the way people are doing sales, and the way people are running HR and recruitment. I think these are all very interesting and very key ways to look at this evolution from social media to social business. So if we can kind of move on to look at the cases there now. The first one that I've picked out is not particularly new, but I think that it highlights something which is very important. I think that the way that Chinese consumers will adopt these ideas if they feel natural. So I think that the smart car selling in China is quite an interesting case to start with group purchase. Because Chinese netizens have been organizing group purchase themselves for a long time, before Groupon had ever been dreamed up. BBS forums were hotbeds of, how can we buy this cheaper if we all chip in together? Can we get this at a better rate? All of these types of things are totally entrenched in the Chinese digital consumer psyche. What wasn't resonating so well with China was the smart car, but from Mercedes-Benz. It's too small, too dinky. It was getting some chat, but it was just cute. Nobody was actually buying it. It was moving very, very slowly. So to try and inject a bit of enthusiasm into the smart car market, BMW and Benz had started to look at ways to really engage with people. So Benz had looked at group purchase. They noticed that of about 4,000 statements of purchase intent every day online in China, we have about 660 group purchase mentions. So they decided to set out their stall with 200 cars. They sold the first in 24 seconds. And the key message here was that they couldn't turn it off quick enough. They gave themselves 3 weeks to try and sell cars, to try and sell these 200 cars, and they'd sold them out within 3 hours. They'd set a limit of 200 and couldn't get the switch flicked back to the off position fast enough, so that was 21 days ahead of schedule and selling 5 cars more than they wanted to. The way that consumers embraced this type of technology and embraced a technology that already catered to current behaviors was really exciting.
Lewis, I have a question here. I have a question here from Julie.
Consumers embrace these types of...
Just a quick question from Julie.
Sure.
Are there any products that aren't suited to this this type of marketing? It's a pretty general question, but I suppose one that's worth asking.
Sure, absolutely. I think that one that's a category, if you like, that's certainly not suited to it is the luxury category. Exclusivity and group purchase don't go hand in hand. So it would be products like that don't work so well. What works hugely well is cinema tickets, that type of thing. All of that works very, very well.
And does it have to be consumer products, generally speaking, or does this kind of social platform, or indeed the one specific example you're looking at here, does it work in anything out of FMCG, or does it work in B2B, or how does that go?
B2B is quite an interesting one, actually, because I think it has, and we've not seen a lot of uptake, but I think B2B, because you have a longer conversion rate from first engagement with a client to actually converting a sale, I think B2B can lend itself to dealing with a network of informed people, and then you're looking at group purchase. So if you have people in various industries that could be making use of, say, computer components, for example, then you would be able to do something if you're a marketer. But it's not as exciting, and the experience doesn't translate so well. There's something about group purchase, for example, this smart car group purchase example. It makes life easier, but it's also quite exciting. It's not that you're part of a option but it gives it a bit of life, and it gives you a community feel that I think that the brand or the product has to suit that.
Fair enough, yeah.
I want to look at the negative side of netizens organizing themselves now, because I think that had a really firm footing in netizens organizing themselves to group purchase before brands got involved. Netizens organizing themselves through social media, we've seen, and crowdsourcing through the human flesh search engine. But in terms of your crisis management, if I've spoken to brands previously which have thought, well, if I don't get involved in social, then I can just ignore any potential crisis. Where what we say a lot in China is a crisis isn't a crisis until it hits Sina Weibo. So if we just ignore Sina Weibo, then the crisis will go away. That's not the case. We also would advise against crashing in head first, as well, as the next couple of slides will show. So what we saw here, there's fast chicken, and that's a chicken that's through hormone treatments, various other things, brought to maturity in 40 or 45 days. Something we rears its head all over the world every once in a while, but for the most part, the Chinese market was not aware of. And the impact on brands as part of this expose of fast chicken was marked. I think, as you can see, the number of mentions of fast chicken on Sina Weibo was about 610,000, and 515,000 of that was a co-mention with KFC. I think that's pretty scary enough. But if we look a bit more about how they respond to that, I think that's the most interesting thing. I think listening for potential crisis is the first step, but knowing how and when to respond is also key. So we see the various peaks on this graph. KFC sent out messages at various times, firstly starting with kind of there's nothing wrong with fast chicken, and going through various phases. So well, we only use less than 1% from this group as a starting point. I think, well, that's only part of the story, and that's what netizens really don't like. They want you to be open and honest and talk authentically about it. So going through, well, we want to be educated. We don't want you to, just give us the highlight. We're looking for information here, and we're going to you, as we saw with people going to the Nike account to find out about Lina's performance, and to various other brand accounts at different stages. We look to trust you as consumers in the digital space in China. We look to brands, and we want you to be trustworthy, because various other things aren't. We don't read newspapers and watch television news particularly looking for trustworthiness. We look to the brands themselves to take some responsibility. I think that's key. So this story just wouldn't die. It just kept bouncing, and there would be like little rebounds in the story that would pick the buzz back up again. It turns out that yes, less than 1% of our chicken does come from that group, but we get other fast chicken from other groups. And you know what? This is a problem that's industry wide. We just want to be investigated, but by the time that KFC are starting to make the right noises, that's too late. We don't trust you anymore. You admitting to supply chain issues and cooperating with investigations, you had your chance to say that right at the beginning and didn't. And that's a big part of what we do as an agency here, but as a lesson to the entire market of just being open and being obvious and being a participant in this community, rather than someone who chooses when and how to engage an audience. We're all part of the same wider community, the same social society, social media society. The darker side, there's more practical problems, I suppose, with dealing with consumers online, if you like. Where do you find your employees? That's a problem for us here, particularly in China. I think that finding the right hires is a key issue. So we looked at ourselves, first and foremost, as an example, and we found that about 80% of our employees were born in the 80s. Now, we're a relatively young and funky and interesting digital company, so that stands to reason. And we want to attract some like-minded people. So if we look at, this is our core demographic, let's find out a little bit more about them. These are our target audience for our recruitment posts and our recruitment posts through social media. So let's find a bit more about them. If we did a white paper not so long ago about youth, young consumers in the age of social media, and we found that they were particular fans of music and astrology. Well, music was no particularly big learning, but astrology is quite interesting. Astrology is a very, very popular conversation amongst the 80s generation. So if we want to make ourselves look attractive and just put out some content that our audience are going to look for, let's talk about the astrological breakdown of CIC staff.
Perhaps you might talk a little bit about the word Jai.
Oh yes, sorry, I'll talk about a little bit about it. Sorry, Jai being third on the list. Jai means to chill out at home and surf the internet and do nothing. Just to chill. So it tends to be something associated, you'll see there with otaku, which is a Japanese word, which kind of means nerd, means someone who spends a lot of time online, does a lot of online gaming. It's not a negative particularly. You know,
I think it's key to say that it's not pejorative in the sense that it doesn't have the same connotations of, I don't know, maybe couch potato, which is a little bit more negative for us, but it's close enough in meaning. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, essentially, Jai being third is it's a strange one for me, on the third most popular things that you like to do, because it's essentially you like to sit at home and talk about music and astrology and movies and fashion and that type of thing. It just means you spend a lot of time chilling out at home, and that the nature of the market here is not watching TV, that's surfing the internet. So that's Jai. So yeah, that worked for us. So when we put out promotional or recruitment style messages, we talk in a way that our target would like to be spoken to, or provide them content that they find attractive or they find engaging. And that's a relatively easy lesson for brands to follow. You can listen to your audience and you can find out what they like to talk about, but then you have to communicate it in an authentic way that's grounded in reality. We can talk about these things because 80% of our employees are doing this. We know our market because we are our market, and we can communicate authentically with them. But I just wanted to kind of hop through a few examples there of the way to leverage this type of information. And now, as the closing stages of this presentation, I want to look a little bit more to the future. Now, it's extremely foolish to predict anything in the Chinese market, because no one saw Weibo coming in 2009 or early 2010 to be the force it is. Then all we could talk about throughout 2010, 2011, and the first half of 2012 was how Weibo was it. It was the most exciting thing to happen to digital media in our lifetime. And then a little while after that, WeChat or Weixin came along, and now it is the most exciting thing that we can think of to talk about. And that's for good reason, in that I think that these two platforms together, when we look at integration and we look at that viral media that is Weibo and that social media that is WeChat, I think the combination of those two things is as close to a crystal ball for future engagement as we're going to get. So for those that don't know about WeChat, I would say get on it. It's great. It's Facebook in your pocket and so much more. It's interesting in China in that we have had Facebook clones and we've had Facebook rivals and we've had various Facebook-esque social networking sites since it was blocked here, put on the other side of the Great Firewall. But this is the first one that's kind of open. You know, we have, say, something like RenRen, which is in look and feel very much a Facebook clone, but targets a campus group. It's a very much university or student-age social network. And the kind of common wisdom is that you age out of RenRen and then you become more of a Weibo user. Whereas WeChat is different. WeChat can be everybody. WeChat you can speak to, you can have your family on there. You can be both friends with, your high school friends, your college friends, your colleagues, your family, your parents. Everyone can be on WeChat, and should be, in my opinion. It's a great way for people to communicate. It's very rich, very very much about sharing detailed content or rich multimedia content, and all of these functions mean it can support a social CRM platform, or allow you to kind of socialize your CRM in some really interesting ways. I think that the way that brands are engaging to use things like QR codes is quite interesting. There's various ways that we can use that. It's becoming hugely popular. it has a built-in QR code reader. So now, whereas it's something that we saw before and we've seen for quite a while now, it just wasn't breaking through because ultimately you never knew where it was going to take you, and you didn't maybe have a QR reader in your phone. Now everyone does, because everyone has WeChat, so everyone has a QR reader, so it's something that's far more accessible and it's very fast. You see brands in a huge variety of industries are using this to engage. And some of the best ways to engage via WeChat combined with Weibo is social CRM. And the example I've put here is about booking tickets. You know, it's that same. It's very practical, very pragmatic, and it's about booking your air travel. And I think that if it's something that you can facilitate it to make more straightforward and more simple, it also allows you to have one-to-one conversation and one-to-many conversations within a group. So you can talk at one point to everybody that's booked tickets on your flight and tell them about delays, or you can speak to one person to either offer upgrades or allow them to pick their seat or any of that type of thing.
I've got a question here from Jim. Is there paid advertising slots on WeChat?
They're looking at them. They're not. There aren't really a well-defined advertising platform at the moment, because it's a relatively new way to engage with consumers. So little things are still being tested. So we can have a brand account, if you like. You can have, a brand can establish their account, but how many times should you be able to send out messages to your followers a day? At the moment, Tencent, who own WeChat, they say it's 3. And if they don't get any complaints, they may well up it to 5. And if they get complaints, then they may say, okay, maybe it's only 2. So we're still in the process of working out how to monetize these things. And it's the same as we saw with Weibo. Sina Weibo has been a force to be reckoned with in the Chinese market for about 3 years now. And it's only in the last couple of months that kind of in-stream advertising has started to emerge, and even then not tested. There's been banners, but now it's kind of in-stream. So it's
just to give a background for those who are not familiar with Weixin or WeChat. I suppose it's not really a static social platform where you plonk information in the same way that you do with Facebook. It's really a communication tool. I guess it just started off as something like WhatsApp, I think, which is probably the closest, but it's just evolved and become a whole load more intelligent, listening, I think, to the audience of how the Chinese market in particular communicates with each other, and just evolved into a way of doing a whole load more things. Lewis, is there anything that you would add in terms of that platform?
I think that's exactly right. I think that it had a built-in audience. As I said, it's owned by Tencent, and right back at the beginning of the presentation when we saw that kind of evolution of platforms, instant messaging in China is kind of 1998, 1999, where instant messaging online was really starting to grow legs. And the key player at that time was Tencent. So everybody in China has a QQ number. Or that was the kind of the running joke here, that you didn't hand out your phone number, you hand out your QQ number. But now there's that audience of QQ users are all transferring onto WeChat, to Weixin. So you have this built-in audience and an audience that is used to using that type of instant messaging. So it originally started out as like you say, like a WhatsApp. So it's kind of a text messaging platform. With voice messaging as well, so you could send recorded messages, and that was like the nucleus of it. And since then, it's taken these things and kind of grown them, so now we can send video and photo. Like sending voice messages, you can use it like a walkie-talkie and keep the channel open. So there's kind of lots of different things being tested out with it, but yeah, I wouldn't make any grand guesses about where WeChat might be heading. But it will just continue to test these things. It will continue to test what it can charge for, whether that's a data API, so you can start to listen to these conversations that are going on, or whether it's kind of paid advertising. I would say in terms of the API relationship, it's a closed social network, so it's not going to be something where we can listen to the same degree as with a microblog like Weibo. It's private messages will always be private. The extent to which private messages are ever private is something we can debate another time, but that's certainly where we stand at the moment.
Okay.
Great. Well, that's kind of it for me, and I appreciate it was a very whistle-stop, but the key takeaway I would say, or I would suggest, is that listening to your audience through social media gives you a better understanding of the context in which the conversations are happening and the things that are driving conversations, and helps you participate. And anything that helps a brand participate in a more kind of open, even-handed, authentic way is the future. And that's the future for markets anywhere, not just the future for the Chinese market.
Well, thank you very much, Lewis. If you have any questions, please drop them in. I have one here from James. How do you maintain Western exclusivity when on social media platforms? I guess that's a question that a lot of brands in this part of the world, they go on that whole kind of quality or exclusivity, and maybe don't want to get caught up in the noise of
Sorry, David, I kind of lost the end of that there.
Yeah, so did you get the question? How do you maintain
Western market?
Yeah, Western exclusivity, basically. That a lot of, I guess the argument they're going for is that a lot of brands here want to position themselves as that little bit different, if you know what I mean, and not get caught in the sort of mass media noise that might happen in China. So how would you recommend that a product would
Still can't hear him.
Oh no. I've done 15 of these and never quite had this. This is the horror story. Are you out there, Lewis? All right. Well, I think we may have to call it a day, because I'm certainly not the one to answer all of these questions. Are you back there, Lewis?
Yes, sorry, I can hear you now. Yes, yeah, I got you now.
Oh, so that was that was a very lunar moment, circa 1960 something or other. Right.
Dark side of the moon.
For the fourth time, how do brands maintain that sense of Western exclusivity in the social media platform in China?
Well, I think that Western exclusivity. I'm not too sure about that, but I think to start with exclusivity as as an idea, those various things are suited to different brands at different levels. So if we have a luxury brand, for example, what we saw, we did a small study where we looked at the content they were putting in. Weibo, the microblog account of luxury brands, being their voice to the Chinese consumer, and we found that a lot of their tweets, if you like, were containing onomatopoeia. They were containing kind of cutesy language, cutesy noises, lots of oohs and ahs, and how pretty is this? So I think a first step for us was kind of educating corporate level to say, these are the people that are driving. These people have their hand on the tiller of your brand voice, and they're steering in potentially dangerous directions. So maintaining that, having a vision of what your brand's voice is. How do you speak? What type of content are you willing to share? What type of company do you keep in terms of who are the key opinion leaders for your brand, and engaging with your market? If a proper strategy that involves all of these different elements can keep an element of exclusivity and controlling the creative direction with an agency that can help with social listening, or with a creative agency that's overseeing the thing, or if you bring these things in-house with the marketing department, whoever's putting out your content. I think a consistent flavor throughout, a consistent message coming from corporate level down, and a really solid understanding of brand tone of voice. I think those are very important things.
Okay, lovely. Got a question here from Anne. Could you give an example of Western companies that have used this? Could you give one good example and one bad example? I'm not sure if, as an agency guy, you want to list names, but it's an interesting question. I guess maybe these people want to go and have a look online and see what noise they're making.
Sure. Well, as I'm in a great position at CIC, where we have always spoken frankly about who's doing a good job and who's not, and we don't have any conflict of interest here in terms of our clients, so I can talk about that. I think that there are brands in China that, I suppose, firstly doing a bad job KFC have not been particularly great. I think that they dove into Weibo very quickly. They had a bit of a crisis around vouchers, which I don't know if made it back home or not. But they had this voucher that you could go in and exchange for chicken wings or something. And they put this out online and said, I'll take it in, but they never actually thought about how many they should put out, or there was no clear strategy behind this. So far more audience were responding to this, and more consumers are walking into stores with these vouchers that they found through social media, and being told that there wasn't enough product to fulfill the order. Netizens went to KFC and started to kind of berate them, and rather than come up with a solution to their problems, KFC just shut down their account and went away and hid for about a year before they emerged on social media again. Because they thought, well, if we just put our fingers in our ears, we'll just pretend all of this isn't happening.
That's not a good strategy, I assume.
No, that's not a good strategy. But
really?
Watching that scenario,
I try that every day. It doesn't seem to work for me either. Yeah.
No, you just end up with full inbox. I think that's whenever I try that, my inbox just fills up. But McDonald's were actually, as a competitor, they were looking at all this happen, and aside from rubbing their hands together with glee, they got a strategy together that said, if anyone brings, if any KFC voucher holder gets turned away from KFC, we will honor your voucher at McDonald's. And they won huge audience with that, huge buzz online, positive buzz online, and converted a lot of KFC customers to McDonald's customers based on that. So that's one example that stands out as a way to do it. I think that pretending just because you're not there, that the conversation isn't going on about you, without you, is a key element of the strategy. There is, in terms of any brand looking to take part in this, it's also, I would think, quite bad to just look for quick fixes. So I think look at your key performance indicators when setting up any type of social activity. Not just, okay, digital agency, add me 10,000 followers a month to my account, because we can go to Taobao and buy you 10,000 followers quite easily. So all that means is we get what we call zombie accounts, or in Chinese you can say water troops, who's either totally fake, computer-generated accounts, or armies of people who sit in giant warehouses at PCs all day, just creating accounts and following brands all the time. So setting KPIs about engagement and the quality of follower, I think that's a good practice.
Okay.
And one that
leads on a little bit, Lewis, to
brands are taking to.
It leads on a little bit to another question, which is something we haven't touched on, but maybe this a more dark and sinister, when you describe warehouses full of people, a dark and sinister side of this, which is this kind of black PR area of people sort of going after you basically, and using this social media to either invent fake stories, or is that really true? Is it really happening? How are companies reacting to it?
It is true. I think that there's certainly something. I mean, it's been mentioned on numerous occasions in the past that the Consumer Day, the annual International Consumer Day, which I only found out about when I came to China on the 15th of March, the expose that happens on CCTV, China's national television network, the annual expose of brands, that those essentially resulted from the right backhander not being paid to the right person. There is that rumor that's constantly gone on. There's also various issues about.
Just for a bit of background on that, there's a television program every year on the 15th of March, which is supposed to be kind of a consumer watchdog, and it is to all effects. But you just get the feeling exactly as he described it. It becomes a national PR disaster, and all the PR agencies are kind of biting their nails for the day before, wondering whether or not it's going to be their guys who get hauled out and shot. But essentially there's this nasty undercurrent that it boils down to, that if you don't massage the right guys at the top level, that they'll just pick on your company, because ultimately you can find something bad to say about anybody if you look closely enough.
Yes, and I think that to kind of temper that a bit, the Chinese consumer is far more savvy than he's given credit for, and knows these things. But they then look more to the example that I showed there, the McDonald's scenario. McDonald's responded very quickly. They said this was an isolated incident. They said that their case was that someone was serving out of date produce, or produce that was just out of date. They were deciding what one store manager was deciding was actually all right to sell. This was dealt with. It was dealt with very openly. It was dealt with very quickly, and that generated really positive PR feedback. That consumers are essentially saying, well, I trust McDonald's far more than I trust CCTV anyway. And so it can have that type of effect too. There is, always going to be a dark undercurrent of people going in and seeding information in forums and that type of thing, and bad-mouthing other brands. The difference with China and the West that I can see in that type of scenario is, if you go in, as a agency jobber, which I have done before, someone working for a digital agency, and go into a BBS forum and start trying to seed little bits of information, you have to be very careful not to get found out, and that's not a place for you. And that's true of China too. Those things. Don't go in and pretend to be someone you're not. These forums tend not to be a place for brands to engage. These are a place for consumers to engage with one another. But saying that, if you go in openly as a brand, willing to engage with people, willing to speak to people, Chinese consumers are far more inclined to engage with your brand and talk about your products and talk about your services and discuss them with you than I've noticed in Western markets.
Okay.
So being open and authentic really pays dividends here, because you don't need to be underhanded. People don't mind being sold things. They have no complaints about that.
All right, thanks, Lewis. I have a question here from Daniel. I guess this gets back to a whole bigger issue.
I assume this pregnant pause means, rather than we're letting that sink in, that I can now no longer hear you again.
Oh gosh, can you hear me again? Are you there?
Last time.
Are you there? Are you there? Are we losing you again?
Sorry, David. Oh, yeah, got you there.
Are you back again?
I'm back again.
Cool.
Again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that wasn't a dramatic pause there at all. So I have a question here from Daniel, and I think it gets back to a wider issue. But do we need to consider registering brand name accounts on these platforms to protect IP? I think that's an extremely important question.
It's a very important question. I think that the verified account is something that in Western markets we tend to think of as being reserved for, are you really the celebrity you say you are? Whereas in China, it's you don't have to be a celebrity to have a verified presence, because you can speak more directly to the platform itself. You can go in and say, I'm coming from this brand. This person has essentially stolen the brand name. They're pretending to be me, and they aren't. You can talk to Sinas and Tencents more openly about that, and they will fix it for you. China is obviously renowned for intellectual property rights and that type of thing, and issues that arise from these things. But when it comes down to owning your IP and owning your presence in social media, you can sort those things out with the companies themselves, with the providers themselves. They're far more approachable.
Yeah, in my experience of it, if you go with a company, if you want to register a company account, you have to demonstrate licenses and all that sort of stuff. I would draw your attention to a 4-part IP webinar series that we did recently, which is on our website. I'll show you a little bit about how to access that later. But definitely, I would follow up on the IP side of things and ensure that you do properly register with these platforms, even if you're not in China now. I would say this to anybody who has a brand who's even considering approaching China. The first thing to do is to start to register your IP. One of the major issues that we experience, and this is pervasive across every industry, is what's called trademark squatting. China still has a first-to-file system, so you don't have to. It's just the first person to turn up to register a trademark will get that trademark. You don't have to demonstrate that it's your company or that it's your product. Even big lads like Apple and these sorts of guys have to do massive payoffs to companies who many years ago might have registered something or other and yet have nothing to do with it. All right. I think we're just approaching the hour. Lewis, are there any maybe closing words that you'd like to pass across to our listeners today? And yeah, over to yourself.
My only closing words would be that this is a really great market to be a part of. I think that if it's something where you're kind of on the fence about either whether to get involved in the Chinese market or whether to get involved in the digital market in China, I think if you go in informed, there really is very little downside to this. I think that setting your aims and establishing a strategy either internally or with an agency that can help you support that and making sure your aims are well established from the outset, there are almost no downsides to being involved in this. I think expecting huge returns depending on your market and your consumer demographic. Temper those things with kind of a bit of social listening to start with, find out what the market is, and certainly if you're getting involved in something like B2B, I think a lot of people can be quite dismissive of the power of social in B2B, but because you can talk to the decision makers and to that key stakeholder within an organization, I think that's very interesting. I think that listening and research is the foundation to all of this, understanding the context in which these conversations are happening and really understanding the context in which you're looking to do business helps you do better business. And as straightforward as that sounds, that's really the message that we always try and get across.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you very much, Lewis, for your presentation this morning or this afternoon if you're in China. So if you enjoyed that, and as I said, if you're interested in our other webinars, I mentioned a collection of IP-related webinars that we did over the last 6 months with the embassy in Beijing. You can just go to our website. I'm highlighting it here. If you just click on what we do and drop down to upcoming events, you'll find there's a section called webinars. There you can register for upcoming webinars. I think we're probably going to have a bit of a snooze over the summer, and our next one will probably be in the middle of September. I shall put that up shortly. But you can see recordings of all the previous ones that we've done, and indeed PPT presentations and that like. So if you've got a colleague or friend who really should have seen this session, or you didn't catch it all yourself the first time round, the past webinar recordings and PPTs can be found on our website and watched at your convenience. And so really all that remains for me now is to say thank you very much for your time. I hope this was valuable for your work. If you have any feedback or suggestions, that could be about today's session or indeed a session that you would like to see us do in the future, or maybe one that you'd like to do yourself on a certain topic, please feel free to contact me directly. So other than that, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all good business in China. Bye now.